Hi guys, I'm Katie Roome. I'm Periapsis Press.
I'm David Roome.
And today we have the Free Narnian as a guest.
Hello, everyone.
Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for inviting me. I'm really honored to be here. I'm a big fan of the stream. I usually have to catch the replay later on, so it's very exciting to actually be not only live, but part of the stream live.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that because I feel like I saw you in the chat a couple times, but I don't usually see you in the chat, but I feel like you do usually watch and share and everything. So,
what time zone are you in?
Pacific.
Okay.
Oh, interesting.
Wow.
I kind of figured that you were East Coast and it was too late.
Yeah.
That's kind of the case. It seems like that's the case for a lot of people. We have a lot of East Coast people that, especially like if they have kids or real jobs or whatever,
yeah,
it's too late for them.
Oh, Timo says that we're echoing.
Okay. Maybe let's see here. Maybe we can pull our mic over a little bit. Let's see here. Does that help? Does that help any better?
Let us know.
Yeah,
Chat.
Yeah. And Timo, who was echoing? Was it us that was echoing, or was it Free Narnian? Okay, he says okay right now.
Okay, that's good.
We can also try to mute and unmute if that ends up being a problem. But it probably was just the mic was a little too close to the speakers. We can pull it closer to us this way too.
Yeah.
Okay. William Jeffrey Rankin says it sounds good.
Okay. Hi to the chat. I saw, and it's gone off my screen now. I saw Michael Caine. Oh, he's in now. And Timo and Matt.
Yep. We got to get Matt Kratz on here sometime too.
Yeah.
So he's another person that we want to get. And, you know, eventually what we'd like to do, it would be really fun if we can find a nice crowd just to have regular guests. So, Free Narnian, do you kind of follow the Comicsgate circles, right?
A little bit. Kind of just tangentially for fun, but I couldn't tell you what the latest, like any of the real news about Comicsgate.
Okay. I don't know if you ever listen to any of their streams, but like I just love Ethan Van Sciver's streams because he just has this roster of guests and somebody interesting always comes on, and it's like this whole cast of characters, and just like whatever they talk about, even if it's just the news of the day, it's always interesting. Somebody always has an interesting take, and it's just really fun.
That is true. Yeah, I have seen a couple of Ethan streams, and he is great at what he does with that.
Yeah,
I know he himself, and like sometimes they ruffle people's feathers with their spicy hot takes, but they are great streams to watch. And you're right,
yeah,
always has the way they do it. They have a well-established chemistry with each other.
Yeah,
like they're a good circle of people, and they all kind of know how to play off each other really well, and that's why. I mean, that's why people will watch his streams when they're like 3 hours long and stuff, right?
Yeah. Yep. Everybody kind of has like a character that they play, but then there's also like the real side of them too. So they'll kind of be in character for some streams, but then sometimes for smaller streams, they're kind of like more real with each other too. And it's just interesting. You kind of feel like you get to know people, and you kind of get a window into their artistic ambitions and all of that. I think it's really cool.
Cool.
So yeah, enough about Comicsgate.
I'll keep saying hi to people because I keep seeing new people in the chat. Cratesbane, William Jeffrey Rankin, Fiona Wolf, hi, Swift Sword Rush. Thank you guys so much for coming. Today I just got kind of a silly article from Lorehaven Yes Men Read is the title of the article.
It's kind of funny because you can also read that as yes men read.
No, it's not a comma. It's punctuated. Just kind of an interesting, very short, very thin article, but I thought that it might serve as a really nice jumping off point for us to talk about men as a demographic for fiction.
There's for sure things to agree with and disagree with in it,
Yeah.
for me at least. And I feel like Free Narnian is always fun to interact with on Twitter, and we share a lot of. He always likes my cynical black pill, red pill takes. So I feel like
Yes.
he might be a good person for this kind of discussion about like what men want and what men should do and what men's responsibilities are. So
Yes.
You're also very well read, as I understand from your C.S. Lewis pin post.
Yes. Well, I'm very well versed in C.S. Lewis nonfiction, and
I think the only C.S. Lewis nonfiction book that I've read is The Four Loves,
which we read together.
Yeah, I think we read that book together when we were dating, because I was a book that I liked, and I think I liked it a bit less when we when we read it again.
I'm sorry.
C.S. Lewis is one of those guys that I appreciate a lot, but in my opinion, he's extremely overrated. And it's probably Free Narnia and I are gonna butt heads about this a little bit, but I love the C.S. Lewis discourse on Twitter, because people are just always having fun with it.
Yeah. David's least favorite quote is about Aslan not being safe but being good.
Yeah.
Every time that comes up, I think you even have it.
No, I have Aslan muted on Twitter, because that's like, it's always that quote that people make.
Yeah, no, that's true. I actually check out of most, especially ironically, I check out most of Narnian discussion on Twitter. The amount of times I've had people throw, "You need to read the Planet Narnia book" around.
Oh yeah.
I have the Chronicles of Narnia are such nice, simple stories that you can read forever, and they will be entertaining and poignant. I'm just not interested in the weirdo scholarly treatment about how the silver chair is really Saturn or something like that. I mean, I don't mean to disrespect the author of that book, but I'm just not really interested in that sort of thing.
You've heard of that guy, right, babe?
Vaguely,
I think I watched him. He was making the rounds, and I think there was a little stint of time where I always go like in on something really hard until I just get sick of it, and then I stop. So like right now I'm going in on comics really hard. For a little bit I was listening to Cross Politic. That's that cute little daily show that the Moscow, Idaho people put out, and the Planet Narnia guy I think was making the podcast rounds during the 2-week window when I was listening to Cross Politic every day. So I heard his spiel, and yeah, I don't have much patience for that kind of thing myself. Every Narnia book is a planet. Like according to the mythological archetypes. Screw Tape Letters. William Jeffrey Rankin. I've read. I mean, I don't know if you'd consider that nonfiction or not. That's one that I read that I thought was pretty good.
It's it's more like his nonfiction.
Yeah, it's a fiction framing story, but kind of nonfiction.
It's
the Screw Tape Letters is a masterpiece. I'd actually say that's one of Lewis's best.
Yeah,
that is like required reading in my opinion. Especially Screwtape proposes a toast, which I think most modern editions of the letters come with the toast
I'm
attached
not
to
sure
the
if I.
end, and that
What's this? Was that written separately or something? I'm not super
yes, that
familiar with
was
it.
written much later as kind of like an unofficial sequel, and it's
Okay.
Okay.
Screwtape is giving like the commencement speech to the Tempters College for young demons graduating Tempter School, and he's getting them motivated to go out into the world and pursue their careers. And it's framed. You kind of get a lot of insight into Lewis's political views in that particular one because Screwtape is giving them a rousing speech of encouragement, letting them know about all the various ways that the Hell's cause is succeeding in the 20th century.
Oh,
And
Hmm.
it's
sure.
very much where you get strong condemnation on Lewis's part of the abuse of the democratic ethos
Mm.
in the English speaking world, where Screwtape celebrates the spirit of the age, which he describes as "I'm just as good as you,"
Mm.
and that the pervasiveness of that attitude amongst everyone, Screwtape celebrates as being the vehicle for advancing the cause of tempters everywhere.
Okay. I wonder if the version that I read had that or not.
It sounds familiar to me.
It's very likely that I read an old edition and didn't have it. I'm not sure
Yeah.
though.
Yeah.
It's been a long time since I read it, so
Yeah, that's what I definitely recommend people check out. Also has a
cool.
very poignant ending. The toast ends with them drinking some decanted souls. They have this wine that's fermented from the tortured souls of
Yeah.
bad Christians that Screwtape delights in saying that their real religion was hating other people's religion. I
Mm.
think it's like a Catholic inquisitor and a Puritan fundamentalist who their whole lives were spent hating the other,
Mm.
and so they have to spend eternity together being fermented in this bottle of wine that Screwtape is serving at his toast.
Nice.
That sounds really, really familiar. So I feel like
That does not sound
I
familiar to me at
probably
all,
read
so
it.
I don't think I did. Um, let me do my indie news stuff real quick, and then we can do the article. I just have one thing. Death Planet releases tomorrow. That's Enor Lapointe's new series, the Dinosaur Warfare series. I reviewed Gun Magus. Chalk is in my Kindle library to read. I haven't read that one yet. Death Planet sounds like it's kind of in the vein of Gun Magus, where it's just like a mash of different ideas together. Fun. So if you guys enjoyed Gun Magus, or if you like dinosaurs, this might be one to check out. The second book and the third book are also releasing this year, September and October. So if you like the first one, then you don't have to wait a super long time for the second and third. Upcoming review will be The Long Moonlight by Razorfist. This one, I call it a short fantasy noir, featuring a master thief, a cunning detective, and a deadly gang lords. There's plural. This one was a really interesting one, and I'm looking forward to the discussion about it for the book club. My top three would be the setting was very urban noir, dark labyrinth city. Thought that was fun, and instead of doing a lot of world building exposition, he did footnotes, which was an interesting choice, a different choice. I haven't seen that done before, but it made it very easy to just skip that stuff if you weren't interested, or if you were like me, you had to go down and read them. I thought that the plot was fun, intriguing, the heist and the vengeance, and then I thought that the ending was maybe a little more positive than most noir would would be, not quite as pessimistic and hopeless. So I'm really looking forward to publishing my review and to talking with other people about this. Okay. Do men read? David, do you read?
Not very much.
The Free Narnian.
Yes, I do read. Mostly nonfiction
Sure.
lately, though.
I read too, but I'm not the subject of this.
Yeah, I'm on a kind of a comic kick right now, and that's what I feel like reading. And I'm at a point in my life where I don't make myself do things that I feel like I should, but I don't want to because I just don't have much time. But yeah, I read a lot in high school and kind of lost the habit of it during college, but I've been picking it back up over the past few years. So Free Narnia, you mainly read nonfiction?
Yes, lately I've kind of been more interested in historical books. I was just reading recently Sean McMeekin's History of the Russian Revolution. Not that that needs to be the topic of the show, but that's
Yeah.
I a lot in terms of fiction. I try to do my part. I've actually read The Long Moonlight. That's probably the most
Oh, fun.
recent new book that I've read,
Okay.
uh, which I enjoyed. Um, maybe we could talk about that another time or whatever more in depth when you want to. But that was a very interesting book. But typically when I read fiction, I read I, I I try to go through the old stuff. I have a running joke. Maybe you've seen it on Twitter that I have I go to Barnes and Noble and I buy all these nice cloth bound classics in hardcover, like these collectible editions, and then they sit on my shelf and collect dust while I play Call of Duty and do anything other than reading.
Yeah. Well, I don't think there's anything wrong with collecting books, so that's fine.
Yeah, we're in the midst of collecting ourselves.
Yeah. A lot of stuff actually that we have already read. But trying to build a library for our kids too. And that's actually what I read a lot of when I was younger is books that my parents had, books that my dad had bought that he never read. I read. Right. So I don't feel the least bit bad in some of this book collecting. Yeah, I mean, so it sounds like you read classics, but then you like to read some of the modern like indie pulp stuff too.
Yeah, because it was really like the new indie stuff that really I felt reinvigorated genre
Mm-hmm.
because there's nothing in trad pub that
Yeah.
interests me in terms of science fiction or fantasy or adventure or
Mm-hmm.
anything like that. It's if you're gonna go trad pub, you really have to go through the old authors. I don't the infamous statement, don't read anything after 1984
Mm-hmm.
or whatever, but that is kind of true, at least within terms of the established authors
Mm-hmm.
that are out
Yeah.
there. I reread Starship Troopers every once in a while.
Mm-hmm.
That's actually probably the book that I've read the most, believe it or not.
Nice.
Kind of a very influential text on me, and I enjoy it the more I reread it. I one of my favorite books. I don't know about you, but this time of year, late summer, always feels very apt for horror for me. Maybe it's because I live in Pacific time zone, and so the fog gets a little heavier.
Sure.
And like the time of year. So I'm planning on revisiting The King of Yellow and The King in Yellow, which is another one of my absolute favorites.
Sure.
The
Yeah.
prose in that book is absolutely astonishing. The
Yeah.
things that he's able to do in those pages is just breathtaking.
Yeah. I have not read that book, so I have read, I would say, most of Lovecraft's stories. But I have not read a lot of the sort of like adjacent stuff that a lot of people talk about. But that one's kind of on my list just because of how much it gets talked about and referenced, and it seems to be something that a lot of other stories kind of reference. I'm always interested in that, kind of what inspires other things.
Yeah. I haven't read that one either, but it's been on my radar for a while.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Highly recommend. It's a very interesting book because it's a collection of short stories, and I
Mhm.
don't know that a lot of people know that. And
Okay.
only the first 4 stories actually have to do directly, at least, with the King in Yellow or anything Cosmic
Mhm.
Horror related, and then the rest are all varying degrees speculative fiction and or just straight up historical fiction. One of the
Mhm.
stories, kind of like where I plateaued, was it was this very it was actually very interesting. It was a very interesting romance story set during the Franco-Prussian War about these Americans that are stuck in Paris while it's being sieged by the German army. It's not what you expect going from the first 4 stories.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Because the first 4 stories, especially, I forget, it's the Court of the Dragon. It's like the third one is that is one of the most Lovecraftian, even though it predates Lovecraft, but like it's just like this surreal, dreamlike experience reading it. It's
Hmm.
just great. I highly recommend you and anyone in the chat that hasn't read it should
Mhm.
definitely pick it up.
So in the romance story that you're talking about, is it just like sort of some passing references to the King in Yellow, like a book or a letter or something in it that kind of ties it in, or what?
Well, they're all connected. The one thing that connects all the stories is that they're all set in France, mostly Paris, and all of the main characters are either artists or socialites or something like that. So they all have very similar lifestyles and outlooks
Hmm.
to each other. Usually, the recurring motif of like an American artiste who travels to Paris for inspiration or just for social
Sure.
connections repeats itself. And there's that. It's actually, it's funnily enough, now that I think of it, it's kind of connected and relevant to this article that that I read that you wanted to talk about, because it does deal heavily, especially the final 2 of the 4 King in Yellow proper stories are very laden with Christian motifs and
Mm.
explicit references to Christianity in general and Catholicism in particular,
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
being set in France, of course.
Mm-hmm.
Um, yes, particularly about in the Court of the Dragon, the way the church is built in ways with regards to preventing the entering of evil spirits is a relevant point of the plot.
Interesting.
Cool.
Interesting. Well, should we get into this article?
Yeah.
See what we have to say about it. Did you get a chance to read it beforehand, Free Narnian?
Yes, I did.
Good.
Okay. This is the article that we'll be looking at. I did link it in the description for you guys' convenience. I am not familiar with James Hannibal.
I looked him up. He's got 2 books in his series that's mentioned in here out, and one of them has like 60 reviews, and one of them has like 30 reviews.
Okay.
And he's got 1,600 followers on Twitter.
Okay.
So he's not like a huge. He's like
Okay.
a indie author, you know.
Sure. Yeah, like I'm not familiar with any of these, but yeah.
I had no knowledge of this author or Borehaven in general before tonight,
Oh,
so
really?
I'm going in as cold as could be.
Lorehaven is kind of an interesting outlet. They
Yeah.
they do some really nice reviews of Christian fiction, Christian indie fiction, books by Christian authors, and they're also associated with the I believe they're associated with the Realm Makers conference.
I think so. Yeah.
Which is a nice little conference for like Christian indie authors.
Okay.
Yeah, I
Um,
don't see anything about it here,
They
but I do remember seeing. Yeah, that
Yeah.
sounds right.
I think kind of my take on them is, kind of like this article, they're more on the Christian fiction side of things,
Mhm.
maybe to a bit of a fault. But they're, potentially people to watch, especially like if somebody is putting a book out that's more, I would say, more explicitly on the Christian side. You can submit it to them, and they
Mhm.
might review it and add it to their library. I don't know how big the outfit is, where it seemed like it might not be like a huge, probably wouldn't be a huge source of traffic or
Yeah.
eyes on your book, but potentially a nice way to get
Yeah.
get a review or whatever. So kind of a neat outfit.
Yeah, somebody shared this with me. I think I follow them on Twitter, but Twitter doesn't really show me their stuff. X doesn't really show me their stuff. Yeah, that
It's
sounds
Twitter.
Real.
It'll always be Twitter.
appropriate.
Yeah.
So the first thing he says is that they're wrong, that men and teenage boys do read, and then he talks about numbers, sort of.
These first few paragraphs to me are just kind of a circular argument.
Yeah,
It's like it's all just kind of like trying to argue about definitions. Like, of course, Christian publishing professionals say that men don't read because they don't read Christian fiction.
yeah,
Right.
Mhm.
This isn't like some big mystery, and it isn't even necessarily like some problem that needs to be cured, although that's kind of the point that he's going to take.
yeah.
Yeah, the intro kind of, well, it's weird because it doesn't feel relevant at first to the point that he makes later on, which is I think more interesting, the call to action that he
Yeah.
puts
Mhm.
forward.
Yeah, I agree.
Well, his call to action is explicitly like, we need to get representation or good books in Christian fiction for men,
Mm-hmm.
which is a little, again, like I think sort of different than the kinds of things that we talk about. Like we
Yeah.
just talk about good indie fiction in general,
Mm-hmm.
without having to sort of say this needs to be
Explicitly
Christian or like published by some Christian
Mhm.
institution. So that's
Yeah.
definitely something different he's doing.
Yeah.
Well, and even a little bit further than that, he kind of lays out like, I hesitate to use this phrase, but I can't think of anything better. He puts forward like a party line
Yep.
that men's Christian fiction needs to follow
Yep.
these rules in its portrayal of its protagonist and such.
Mhm.
I think it almost kind of appears like a checklist.
Oh yeah.
And
Yep.
I feel that's probably where we would sail towards more contention with this, because I know you guys, right? We've been following this, right, but I think we all know that that's not the three of us are more in favor of the art, the true creative,
Yeah.
not necessarily making a moral fable for the purposes of instructing,
Mhm.
Right.
rather than a work of art to be enjoyed that can perhaps exemplify morals
Yep.
or
Right.
be infused with morals.
Mhm.
But yeah, I do not. I kind of, I depart from this worldview that, yeah, that you should open up the Christian book and or the fiction book and be instructed on how to live your life. And I'm not
Mhm.
even sure that women's Christian fiction would do the same thing. Not that I can't say that I'm very experienced in that genre, but just from glancing, I'm one of those people. I still shop at Barnes and Noble. I go to my local Barnes and Noble, and I see there is a section. There is like a Christian section, and all of
Yeah.
the covers are women in dresses standing in front of barns and such,
Mhm.
and the plots generally are it's a YA kind of love story or something at
Mhm.
the end. And I don't know that I wouldn't bet that if I opened one of those books and I looked through it, that there would be some sort of uh character that the young woman reading the book is being clearly called to emulate.
Yeah. Well, that I think it's an assumption, but I think it's a sort of fair assumption, just kind of seeing in general in our culture how the church and how Christian institutions talk to men versus women
Hmm.
is like, and you see a ton of it in this article, is like men need to be told what to do,
Hmm.
right? Men have kind of gone astray and we need to lead them back. They need to have
Yeah.
and even we'll get into this later in the article, but he even is like, he's like, what can you do? Like, you can force men to read these books, right? Is basically what he says.
Yeah. All of his,
No, he actually says go ahead and nag the
yeah.
men in your life to make
But
sure that they're
Yeah.
reading the books that they should be reading, and not,
Yeah.
the call to
you
action
can't.
is clearly for women in this article.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and check up on them and ask them, have it's like a homework assignment, and it's like you're
Yeah.
yeah, I mean, I would just go ahead and say, if you try this approach seriously, it's gonna blow up
Yeah.
Yeah.
disastrously. I mean, as young men, he talks about men of all ages, but teenagers, in particular, teenage boys already have this at school.
Yep.
Right.
Okay, they go to school, especially if they go to like a public school for 8 hours a day. They already have someone shoving a book that they don't want to read into their face and telling them, read this and think about it in this way, and don't let any dirty, nasty, bad thoughts enter into your head, comrade, or else you're going to,
Yes.
like,
Exactly. Yep. Yep. Just
the
a
last thing in
different.
the world that they need is for that to happen to them in their homes.
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Um. So yeah, like the only part of this introduction that I thought was um of note, I guess, was this let's be honest about our failings. We gave up ground to the world, the key battleground of men's hearts, and it's going to take fighting, clawing, and sacrificing to get it back. It's extremely
Like,
inflated.
yeah, like we're
Yes, he makes it sound so desperate.
even if you're just talking about like Christian fiction and like the establishment of Christian fiction, like, is this actually true? I mean, this guy is saying that, he knows like these rich people who write men's books who aren't Christian, and maybe
Mhm.
he's in the Christian, but like, I just like statement like that, and like, first of all, giving up ground implies that you had ground at some point. So like, was there, like, in the 80s, was there like this robust men's Christian fiction movement? No. Like, what are you talking about? Right? That didn't exist. So I honestly don't know what he's talking about here. It would be interesting actually to talk to this guy and see,
Yeah.
like, what the heck were you talking about? Because I
Mhm.
have no idea what he's talking about.
Yeah, I don't know if he's talking about like not talking about Christian fiction, but talking
Mhm.
about like action fiction in general, like
Mhm.
Clive Cussler and whatnot.
Or maybe even just culture, pop culture stuff in general.
Yeah.
There's a reference to, because he does mention later on that at somewhere in there, about how men and boys, in lieu of fiction, prefer video games and movies and such. And so there's a little bit of taking all
Yeah.
cultural entertainment mediums together.
Yeah.
Right.
I wonder why men would prefer video games. Like, maybe the last medium that, like, still to this day, despite endless SJW meddling, is like still actually pleasant, good-hearted, nice stuff for men. Like, maybe that's why maybe
Yeah,
that's why
no,
they
that's true. Well,
enjoy those.
because again, boys don't go through school being conditioned to associate video games with this awful stuff that is put into high school curriculums, right?
Yeah.
You know,
Imagine if educational video games were a bigger thing,
Oh,
right?
no.
Like something that you did on your home time for homework because you sat in front of an educational video
yeah, like one of those typing instruction things or
Oh,
something.
yeah. William Rankin wonders if he's talking about more general trends, and I think he might be.
I think you might be conflating them in the beginning here,
Yeah.
specifically.
To be honest, this again is just another typical thing that people do when talking to men. It's like, oh, men, it's kind of the sort of defeatist, like, we gave up, we ceded ground,
Mhm.
Men are letting women down or whatever.
Yeah.
And then men now have to stand back up. It's part of this sort of rhetoric.
Yep. Yeah. Men need to do all this stuff, and
Yeah.
women need to be the ones to help them
Yeah.
find the motivation to do so.
Yeah.
Yes, yeah, this seems to be a recurring theme. There's a lot of overlap between a perspective like this and the of Walshian perspective.
Mhm.
Yeah. Yep.
Actually,
The-
I just wanted to point out Fiona Wolf in the chat. I think it made was making the point that I was trying to make, that that the assigned books make kids hate reading.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Boys, and so that, I think, I mean, that's a major. It is that seeding ground, right? Like, that's not a seeding ground as much as it's just a failure of the educational system,
Right. Yeah.
that for whatever reason the curriculum that's selected are these books that, as Fiona said, like, appeal to no one but especially teenagers.
Mhm.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely.
Hmm.
I thought that the meatiest part of this article was the next section, because he makes several points that I think are
Mhm.
probably true of fiction in general, not just Christian fiction, but the idea that we've conditioned them, that men have stopped reading because they've been taught by the books that they are reading that reading isn't for them.
Mhm.
I don't know. The assigning of blame here is a little bit.
He does say here. So when I missed this sentence in the first read through. So when he's talking about how it's like half of the Christian new releases are romance, or half of the top 100. Yeah, half of the top 100 Christian new releases are romance versus 18% in the secular market, and then 52% of the top evangelical Christian publishers are romance. And then he says, if we could pull up the 1995 numbers, I guarantee they look different. Would they? Sure. I don't know, but he is making that claim. So he's saying that there's a shift towards more romance heavy stuff.
I wonder what the numbers would look like, because I think in the 90s they were still pretty romance heavy. Christian fiction has been heavily associated with romance fiction for a long time. So I don't know that it would look that different.
And he's kind of setting up this like, oh, Christian fiction has let people down kind of thing, but it's like they're serving a market, right? And if the market is, oh, here's a Christian alternative, like, women want to read romance novels, but they want a clean alternative, so that's what is going to be served. I don't know if that's really an argument that they're letting men down, right?
Right.
Like just because it's like chicken versus egg thing, right? Just because a huge fraction of the bestsellers are in this one genre, that doesn't mean that if you just publish more books in other genres.
Yeah.
But I think too, he's going to get into that. He isn't necessarily blaming publishers. He's blaming people, and people need to force men to read.
Right.
Right. Well, part of his problem is that he feel that it's a letdown or it's a failure on the part of someone, whether it's the people or
Yep.
publishers though, but because men are in danger of having their personalities molded by the books that they read into non-Christian directions, and that unless if they are exposed to books that meet the criteria that he lays out later on, then there's some sort of moral crisis that will happen as a result.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Which I again, is very interesting, and I kind of excited to get into what his criteria actually is, because again, the part of like as with the execution where he's his proposal is to literally nag people into is a disaster, and just as I think that his prescription of what the books themselves should contain
Hmm.
also would lead to not good books or not
Hmm.
Hmm.
entertaining books, or
Yeah.
books kind of devoid. And I have my own ideas actually as how to solve this problem that he's
Oh, good,
identified.
Good.
good, good.
Oh, go
So,
ahead.
so I was just saying, I'm glad you have your own ideas, because it's one thing to just criticize somebody else,
Right.
but we're about trying to talk about solutions and what we think the
Yeah.
actual solution is. So
Yeah.
it'll be
We're-
fun to get into that.
We don't want to just be dragging this guy through the mud, just like being like, hey, you see a problem and your solution sucks. No, like we agree that there is a problem, but not in the exact same way, and our solution might be different.
Hmm.
Hmm.
So men avoiding fiction for various reasons. I don't know if saying that they've been conditioned to do it as if that's there's some sort of purposeful campaign to make men stop reading. Publishers gave up the demographic, and they don't think that that demographic is worth investing in monetarily, is
Mhm.
basically his argument. And I think that's true of fiction in general,
Hmm.
not just Christian fiction. Um,
And that's one of the great things about indie fiction, is that, at least in our vision, a lot of the power of indie fiction comes in being able to just do things that don't have to make monetary sense.
Yeah.
Right? You don't have to think you're going to make back all of the money you spend making a book to put it out there when you're an indie author. It can be just something that you do for fun.
Yeah. Yeah, something that you invest your time and energy in, and make the way that you want it to be.
Yeah, it's interesting. He's talking here about sort of as like a Christian fiction publishing institution need to put out good books for men, even if it's not financially sensible. Like, the fight is worth it, even considering the financial cost. I think that's interesting. I think that's something I'd kind of agree with him on, right? Like,
Yeah.
you don't have to. I mean, obviously, if you're running a business, there's limits to what you can
Right.
justify, but I think that's something that we'd agree with him on.
Yeah, I think I hesitate to say, oh, Christian publishers should do this, and like take the financial loss or whatever. Just because I think that publishing is kind of dying out, and they can't put stuff out fast enough to really be useful. And I think the administrative overhead is that I think the idea of taking a loss would probably bankrupt them.
Yeah.
So, but I think from an indie perspective, yes, absolutely. I think that.
Are you guys familiar at all with Banner of Truth Publishing?
I've heard of it. I couldn't tell you what they publish, so maybe you could.
So they're a Christian group based out of Scotland, and they publish a lot of theological texts.
Mhm.
they're pretty interesting. They have a lot of good. They republish a lot of really old books, which I appreciate. But I bring them up because they have this documentary about themselves on YouTube, and it's very interesting because they have a similar dilemma actually to what we're talking about here, where they're saying, we need to publish the books that we think are spiritually edifying, and balancing that with books that will sell well so that we have money
Hmm.
to continue to exist.
Sure.
And the guy just puts it so succinctly, where he goes, it would be irresponsible of us to bankrupt ourselves publishing books that no one would read.
Hmm.
Right? Like, we're, we try to publish the books that we think are valuable, even if they're not really popular. But like, we're
Yeah.
not going to destroy our our organization uh, to make a point or something like that.
Yeah.
Hmm.
I think that in publishing, the margins are so thin that that's a very big risk.
Yeah, and you have other considerations too, and responsibilities to the people
Yeah.
at the company, and the people who support it. Right? It's like, it's not right for I think for your customers or people who've invested you to lose you because you decided to bankrupt yourself uh,
Yeah.
for the
Hmm.
sake of
Yeah.
some principle.
Hmm. I
The-
think.
Go ahead.
Sorry, one other thing I want to point out about this section
Sure.
is so he again he keeps using the language of like taking things back.
Mhm.
Like the where does he say it? I think yeah, men's fiction market from the big brands like Clancy and Bourne is too costly. It will take years of losses to even scratch the surface of taking back meaningful market share. True, it will. It'll be painful and difficult. Man up. So whatever he's advocating for, he's actually advocating in some way for this idea of taking market back from secular
Yeah.
men's fiction, and I think that's interesting.
That is interesting. I think it's interesting because I don't think that's where
Yeah.
the lost market is.
Hmm.
I don't think male Christian fiction readers or men who would read Christian fiction if it was as
Yeah.
this guy envisions it
Hmm.
have gone to read secular brands. I think they've stopped.
Yeah, or that that one needs to replace the other. Like
Mhm.
there probably are a lot of people who would read both.
Yeah.
So, and this is kind of Katie and I, we're not interested in like taking down Trad Pub and replacing it with some new establishment, right? We kind of see this indie grassroots movement that eventually makes it so that people can write and publish indie books to a bigger, more receptive audience.
Mhm.
Things sell in small numbers. Maybe there's some ones that take off, but it's not about replacing some current institution.
Right.
So it's interesting that he's kind of taking that tack very explicitly here.
Mhm. Yeah, it is.
And it's framed in this very dagger in the teeth, trench warfare type language,
Mhm.
which, I mean, is understandable in the broader context of culture and cultural conflicts. But
Yeah.
with this specifically, in terms of like publishing and stuff like it, well, like you said earlier, like as if the ground had been lost, as if there's some defeat that happened that needs to
Yeah.
be
Yeah.
avenged. And I mean, I don't know. I wasn't around in the 80s and early 90s, so I couldn't say as to whether or not there was some sort of robust explicitly Christian stronghold in the world of fiction that went away at some point. But
Yeah.
I don't think there was.
I mean, like, who can you list off the top of your head? Ted Decker, Frank Peretti.
Yep.
I mean, we've read them, right? Like,
Yeah,
it's not
yeah.
like
There wasn't a million.
it's.
I mean, I was there in the night.
Yeah. Yeah.
I was born in '89, so like I was there in the '90s, and it's not like there was a million Christian alternatives to everything that were super popular. It was always a niche thing.
Mm-hmm. It's not like there were a whole bunch of books, Christian books for men, that poof disappeared. We don't have them anymore, right? Like that's
I can't think of anything like a Christian equivalent to Ted Dekker or Tom Clancy off the top of my head.
Yeah.
Right, because you had like, what do you have? The Left Behind books is probably the biggest thing. They're more sort of drama, thriller, supernatural kind of thing. You have Frank Peretti, which he's really good, ranges from horror to thriller stuff. Not like, it's not men's adventure books.
Right, yeah.
I don't know.
Yep. The next section is he lays out like these images of masculinity, these ideas. First, he talks about like secular men's fiction, and it's all very generic, right? Like, oh, bad, right? Drinking, anger, sex. And then political darling. The previous publishing year. I think it's interesting that he brings this up because I think that themes are interesting. That's why I talk about them in my reviews. I usually try to talk about what I think the story is trying to say, but I think that the idea is kind of baked into his argument here, right? That Christian fiction shouldn't depict sin. Right? You can't have men who do these things in your Christian fiction.
He gets into that a little bit when he kind of says like there should be consequences for sin, which I think you and I kind of agree with, in the sense of like things follow from those things. So part of like writing a good realistic story is that things do have consequences. But I don't know. I look at most of the stuff they list in this first section, and that's just, those are tropes, but they're all sort of good ways to have conflict in a story. And a good story has conflict and character development and flawed characters, right? I mean, it's like if you want this men's adventure fiction where the guy's like a super spy, super adept at stuff, he's got to have some flaw. So what's the easy flaw? He's like
a womanizer.
He's a womanizer or drinks a lot of alcohol, right? And he's angry, right? These aren't
a spy that isn't able to emulate a criminal seamlessly is a very poor spy. I mean, right? But that too. I just very much push back on this idea that fiction is supposed to be an instruction manual where you paint yourself by the numbers of the main character. I think stories are works, like you're supposed to take them as a whole.
Yeah.
In my opinion, this is I brought up like the King in Yellow before. You know, part of the majesty. I don't even remember most of the characters' names. Actually, I probably couldn't even tell you them on the spot. Right, because the identities of the characters isn't what's interesting. It's the story as a whole, and the prose and the things that it triggers in your imagination and the feelings that it evokes within you. That's what matters. Right. So this idea that as I say, that this is, you're supposed to read this and go, I'm gonna go out into the world and be James Bond or Jack Ryan or even Conan the Barbarian or Solomon Kane. Solomon Kane. I don't think Solomon Kane could clear his checklist here.
Right.
Of being even though Solomon Kane is probably the most famous pulp Christian hero, actually, who's become so popular in recent years. I go to Barnes and Noble frequently. For the first time ever, I saw the collected tales of Solomon Kane on the shelf at Barnes and Noble. there was only Conan with Robert E. Howard on
Mm,
his section in the fantasy section, and recently Solomon Kane has been added. I think just because that character has become so popular by word of
mhm.
mouth that
Yeah.
there's like a new demand for that. But that wouldn't clear the list because Solomon Kane, he doesn't drink, he doesn't swear explicitly. I think he might swear implicitly in one story, and he's not a womanizer, but he isn't a squeaky, shiny Hallmark
Right.
guy that puts up Christmas decorations and
Mm-mm.
flirts with snowball fights. Like,
Yep.
right? That's not. He, he goes into jungles and fights zombies and insults evil vampire queens to their face, calls them
Mhm.
harlots from hell and stuff like that. And so I don't know that that fits in with this type of vision that's outlined here.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I don't know. Even just like the anger thing, right? I mean, that's just such a low. That's such an easy thing to like. Such an easy thing that you could force into any story, right? Like if a
Yeah.
man reacts to something with some amount of anger or vengeance, right?
Oh, this one is like, oh, well, you're not a bad guy because you don't drink and you don't have a lot of sexual partners and maybe you don't hold with all that LGBT stuff, but you are an angry person, so
Yeah.
you're not a real man, right?
Yeah.
Like, and especially when what I'm seeing a lot in indie fiction is a lot of frustration and anger like from men about the culture, right? Like there are valid angers,
Hmm.
and to just say, and I know he's saying letting anger guide him, but like that just feels like weasel words to
Yeah.
me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that is such a broad statement open to too much interpretation that it's not very helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. As for his list about what manly men actually do, it's got Bible verses, so it must be right. Um,
Yeah.
uh, so they're all fine, right? Like it's not like he's advocating anything here that's
Hmm.
Well, no, I mean,
unbiblical
this
or
is like
whatever.
good life advice, but I just don't know that if I were to
Mm,
write a book on this, again, like Solomon Kane doesn't
Exactly.
clear the he fails this test because he doesn't have a
mhm.
family that he puts first. He's a very undomesticated character because he has to be because his whole point is that he travels around the world fighting evil.
Hmm.
You're right. I get if you want I mean, I don't know. I don't want to put words in the writer of this article's mouth or like assume that I know what he's thinking. But just kind of going off of this, I get the impression that like the ideal Christian book to the men's Christian book, according to these guidelines, is the male equivalent of the young woman in the long dress standing outside of a
Exactly.
barn.
Yes.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And I just you know, like, which is fine. I mean, there's plenty room in the
Mhm.
world for those types of stories to
Yeah.
exist, but I don't think
Yeah.
Well, like this line, right? A good man fights for what is right. No, he's not dumping the villain into a stack of tires and lighting it on fire. Like, what? Why not?
Well, and something, I don't know again how much of this is intentional, but he's got 4 points here. Basically, like, is a Christian, right?
Mhm.
Uh Loves his family and is sexually pure. Uh Fights for what is right and is not prideful.
Mhm.
And then out of these, he sort of says, okay, well, if he doesn't, the story could have consequences. And he mentions that for the is a Christian one and is not prideful one. He doesn't say yeah, you know, the good man, you know, is sexually pure, but if he's not, then the story points to the consequences. It's like that's straight. That's
Yes.
straight out. You can't have a Christian hero that is not sexually pure,
Mhm.
right? And I'm always gonna hammer on that one because that's that's what I like to write about. So my characters are Christian heroes who are not sexually pure. And I think that's really it's interesting, right? Why aren't there more stories that have that kind of thing, right?
Well, no, it is a sin that a lot of people struggle with.
Yeah.
It's not like you can't be Christian if you can't be pure, right? It is a sin
Yeah.
that you need deliverance from.
I mean, I think as like a teenager and as like a college age person, like I struggled a lot more with sexual purity. I never slept around before we were married, but I
Yeah.
had, you know, there's some the thoughts and other actions that I struggled with. I struggled with that way more than I struggled with pridefulness,
Right, yeah.
right? You know, it's just it's just kind of silly. It's like there's certain things, yeah, we can kind of have some sin here as long as we show the consequences, but other things that's just beyond the pale.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah. Yeah, and you can fight for what's right, but like there's a limit. Like you can't go too far. And it's kind of a like a cultural line.
Mhm.
It's there's a Christian fiction okay level of violence, right?
Yeah. There's some really good comments. You
Oh,
can
yeah?
bring
Yeah,
up.
again, which I mean that has to just be so subjective that I don't see how that is really helpful to anyone.
Right.
I mean, you know, again, well, you know, but now to just not be totally nagging all the time. This is where like I have a solution for like the type of story that could actually clear this and also be a good story.
Mhm.
Okay.
It's actually it's very simple. It's historical fiction.
Mhm.
Sure. Yep.
Like you could, if you, I'm thinking like you want a story that engages with men and but has characters that portray or exemplify or are imbued with Christianity, but you know you don't want it to be you don't want the book to be a sermon, right? So the best way to do that is to portray characters in a setting where Christianity is ubiquitous.
Yep.
Right.
Right. Is that we're so it can become just infused into the narrative
Mhm.
as a whole without coming across as, you know, that the book is pointing a finger at you and telling you that you
Mhm.
need to be doing this or that. So
Yeah.
there's like 1,000 stories that you could tell in the American Civil War alone that would be excellent books for men, that would be engaging with male readers, and that
Mhm.
would you could have characters in that setting that fit all of this. Right.
Mhm.
That was a period in history where almost everyone carried a Bible on them if they could afford one.
Yeah.
Right,
Mhm.
where there were pocket Bibles available to the average person. So that would be an excellent way, I think, to meet this goal that's being
Mhm.
set forth here.
Well, and so much of that Christian romance fiction
Yeah.
is historical
Yeah.
fiction.
Hmm.
Historical or Amish,
Yeah, or
right?
Amish.
So they're deliberately set in a culture where, you know, there's not going to be any like sleeping around before you're married,
Yep.
and there's not going to be any cleavage,
Yep.
right?
And nobody's struggling with porn.
Yeah, so you have to, so then you can you can have other kinds of conflicts that stay away from
Yep. Yep.
those particular issues.
No,
Mm.
exactly. Yeah, we could just write different versions of the Red Badge of Courage forever, and be thought not that I don't mean that like dismissively. I mean that like for real. Like this, that would be a real solution
Yep.
to. I
Yep.
think.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Did you have anything in particular? I was gonna grab this one from Brian.
Oh, it was that one, and I just liked William Jeffrey Rankin's comment about doing what's right
Oh.
might entail dumping the bad guy into a stack of tires.
It might. And in indie fiction, it often does.
Mhm.
Well, yeah, I mean, that sometimes maybe that's just the best way for the story to go, because sometimes
Right.
the narrative needs to be good,
Hmm.
and
Mhm.
sometimes the narrative needs a flaming stack of tires.
You know, so often in Christian fiction, they back off at the last minute, right? Like it's a revenge story all the way up to the point where the main character is holding a dagger to the bad guy's throat, but then it's like, but I can't actually do this. I
Mhm.
can't actually take justice for myself, right?
Mhm.
And but like there's um a lot of reassurance that comes from actually watching a bad guy die,
Mhm.
where it's like, no, this is done, right? There's not going to be a sequel. There's not going to be a like, oh, he gets out on bail, right? Like, there's not going to
Mhm.
be any of that. Of course, thematic implications. Comment from Brian McCoppin. The biggest issue I see with this article is that the story of Christ is about redemption. If a character starts a story meeting all of these requirements, there is nothing to redeem.
Mhm. Yeah, and I
That
mean, oh, go
Go
ahead,
ahead.
Farina.
That's what I was to say. Yeah, that's very true. And I mean that's a very good point. Except that the only thing left for the character to do is to fall in love and raise a barn together. Which again, but then now we're back to square one,
Yeah, right.
Yeah,
right? Or now we're back to the
yeah,
books that aren't appealing to the demographic we're talking about.
yeah,
So
and
you can't have this. You can't have your cake and eat it too here.
Mhm.
and and we like all kinds of stories here, right? So I think Katie and I do like stories that involve redemption or some kind of character arc or flawed character.
Mhm.
But I mean, the other thing is, a lot of people just like sort of hear up flat arc
Yeah.
characters and stories that are about external conflict, or romance where it's maybe not about like people being bad people and becoming better people, but sort of like miscommunication and tension and things like that.
Yeah.
So
Mhm.
I think what it comes down to though is that stories have plot and conflict, and you have to have some kind of conflict or tension or problem in order to have a story.
Yeah.
So if you don't, if the people are too perfect, then you don't have that opportunity.
Mhm. Brian also says one solution is to make the bad guys literal demons, so killing is a good thing. Cratesbane says somehow Palpatine survived.
That's true. Yeah, sometimes you can kill the villain and still it won't matter.
Why won't you die?
Yeah.
Oh man. um and then again he talks about fighting for this ground. But the biggest problem that I see with this pair of sections is that he has married the idea of men reading fiction to a purpose of instruction,
Mm-hmm.
and not a
Mhm.
purpose of um, of entertainment, um, of encouraging virtues through story, of communicating greater truths. It's just about how to be a man,
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
which,
Yeah,
like you
yeah,
said,
this is where we definitely get into territory where I think probably most of us can't help but roll our eyes just a little bit because yeah, I mean, I don't feel like it's an unreasonable criticism to say that that's a very obnoxious suggestion to put forward, that you should nag the men in your life
Yeah.
to be reading the proper books.
yeah,
You should scroll down to the
yeah.
point where I think it all fits on one page.
It's a hard sell, but Christian fiction must fight for male readers. Yeah, yep. Okay, go ahead and nag. There it is.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
Here are his solutions. Women, buy the books. Women, hand the books to your sons, husbands, and fathers. Women, ask them about the books. Nag them about the
Yeah.
books. Also, nag your Christian publisher.
Help them build a habit of reading healthy stories, like reading is a habit that everyone should have, right?
Mhm.
Like, I'm not here on Monday night saying everybody needs to read. I'm saying I want there to be good books for everybody who wants to read.
Mhm.
But it's not like a healthy habit, like brushing your teeth, right? It's one of many fulfilling, nice things that God has blessed us with that we can enjoy and,
Yeah.
you know, and partake in many different ways, right? It's goofy.
Yes, no, that is wonderfully said. If I may say so. That's perfect. No, because this whole idea that that the purpose of a book is this utilitarian idea that this is some sort of moral psychological exercise as
Mhm.
opposed to you know s- something else, and that this attitude that that again you need to be like I said, like it's brushing your teeth, like this is a grooming thing. Actually, I
Mhm.
was listening to one of your earlier streams, I think last week, where you said early on, you made this comment, and it was perfect. Because we just live in this world now where these types of attitudes are so prevalent. And then people like you and Katie come along with this very benevolent message of, yeah,
Oh,
you
yeah.
are actually free to make your own decisions
Yeah.
on some things, that people just lose their minds, and
Yeah.
that we've like lost the capacity for even
Yeah.
thinking
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. In his mind, there's two options, right? There is the secular men's fiction that teaches something bad to them, or
Mhm.
the Christian fiction that
Yeah.
teaches something good to them. And
Yeah.
it's like there's not
And
this.
and the option is either men will just go off on their own and read bad secular men's fiction, or we being him and a bunch of women have to tell men to read the good fiction.
Yeah.
Right. There's no vision of a world that changes in such a way that men want to pick up the good fiction of their own accord,
Yeah.
or it's advertised to them in an effective way, or
Mhm.
promoted to them, or they hear it from their friends by word of mouth.
Mhm.
They have to be told what to do.
They have to be handed the book. It has to be pushed into their
Yeah.
chest.
Well, exactly. And do any of the women that are served by the women Christians fiction, is that how they started reading? Like did their
No.
fathers come to them and push these books into their hands, and they said, you need to read this to make sure that you don't read the nasty, dirty uh alternatives to this, and then were nagged about it into compliance? Or
Yeah.
did
This
they
will teach
just
you how to
get
be a woman.
yeah, or did they just find books that they liked because that they were books that
Yeah.
they thought were
Yeah.
good?
Yeah.
Mhm.
Right, like that's the natural proper way of the process.
Mhm.
Was that that seems to be a big oversight in this line of thinking here.
Yeah. Yep. It's just so.
I'm sorry, I was reading Crate Spade comment there
Yeah.
about
Oh.
he wishes that, yeah, there.
Well, the key word there is good.
Mhm.
Would accost you with good books.
Yes.
Oh, I thought you were saying it was a bad Christian woman that would accost him with books.
Well, if she is nagging, that would be bad because that's not an effective way to communicate or an appropriate way to communicate.
No, it's not nagging, it's accosting. This is in this is how all great love stories start.
Yeah.
Sure. Patrick says that it's okay to have read a book on his honey-do list. Oh man.
I think we pretty much made it through that article. I don't know if there's a whole. Well, I guess he's got some more action steps in that last.
Yeah. Yeah, not really.
Yeah.
He says, okay, here's something to talk about. So he up here in the paragraph before the bullets, which are really easy to read, so we sort of skip the paragraphs. He talks about what to do. And here's his thing. Reviving men's Christian fiction through action, reconditioning our men's Christian culture to read healthy stories. There's that healthy word again.
Yeah.
And telling our Christian publishers to get back in the game.
Even if it needs financial strain for a few years. It's so silly.
I mean, yeah, that's not. I mean, I'm picturing like, you know, investors and businessmen reading that sentence, and like what their actual reaction to that would be, because that's all fine to say,
Right.
but like it's like,
Yeah.
okay, you know, I'm like a real person. We have real families to feed,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
We're putting our families first, and like, so we're not going to bankrupt ourselves pursuing some project that we're still having troubling defining here, right?
Right.
Because like I said, there's that healthy word. What does that mean? Is this again? Why don't you go to Banner of Truth or any whatever, you know, a theology publisher for the denomination you're a part of? Because Banner of Truth mostly does exclusively does reformed books, but why don't you pick up theology books and have a men's theology group if your goal is to read to become better people?
Mm-hmm.
I don't get this idea, right? Like the goal of a Jack Ryan Tom Clancy thriller is to have fun. I'm
Right.
sorry, but it is, right? It's just to have
Mhm.
fun.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think anyone goes into a book like that with any kind of attitude or mindset that this is going to make me a better person, or I'm going to know how to live my life at the end of reading this.
Yep. Yep. Patrick says, when she holds a book and says, if you don't read this, I shave half my head.
That's real, right? Like there's no way, that's way too specific to not be real.
I interpreted that as like she would just shave off half of her head, but maybe he meant like a feminist like
Oh, sure,
undercut.
sure.
So I don't know. Either way, it's a funny picture, and I like it, and it's a lot more fun than any of the suggestions in this article for how
Yes.
women should get men to read
Yes.
books.
Absolutely.
Yes, Doug Wise has a great reaction.
You want to read it?
Yeah, shifting my toothpick to the other side of my mouth and pointing out Zoomers these days might like that.
I feel like indie fiction is already doing the work of reviving men's
Absolutely.
men's fiction
Mm-hmm.
in general, Christian fiction in particular for stuff that I've reviewed. Although it hasn't been like this is a book for men, right? Like it's just been good books, right? But like I think that his point about reconditioning the culture to read, I'm just cutting out the word healthy there, is an interesting one, because I don't think there's an easy answer for how to do that. I don't think it's nagging.
Well, you know, I mean, how many people do we know on Twitter that are indie writers or indie publishers or anything like that that are themselves Christians and avowed, like explicitly Christians, like they're candid with their Christianity? Like, how do you think Kursova magazine approaches their business with this checklist here?
No.
right? With anything that this guy's talking about,
Mm-mm.
Right.
like
No.
it's they seem to be doing well for themselves. So I don't know. Or Ethan Van Sciver,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
I don't think that Cyberfrog conforms to this, uh, outlook here. This plan.
Nope. And the interesting thing is, since you brought up Ethan Van Sciver, like he does actually think a lot about, and he does have sort of a positive vision for what comics should be,
Mhm.
and he does actually believe that they should be sort of morally prescriptive for a target audience of like boys. But he wouldn't say that doing that requires adhering to anything like this
Right.
checklist.
Right. Yeah.
Right. So you can even be somebody who believes that, maybe is more towards the message fiction end of the spectrum than Katie and I,
Mhm.
and still believe that you can do it in a more abstract way than what this guy's, laying out.
Yeah. Yep.
Well, because even as a Christian, I think that it's I'm not speaking out of turn here, but you actually owe it uh, to be good at your craft. And if you're
Mm,
a Christian artist and Christian storyteller, right? This is a very Lewisian mindset, but you give your work to God, right? Like that is your work for your neighbor that glorifies God. And
Mhm.
so, for the sake of being good at your vocation, you are obliged to tell a good story, and even if so that would entail not necessarily following any kind of checklist type thinking that would prevent you from doing that.
mhm,
Right.
mhm,
Well, I think what we see in indies right now are a lot of Christian men looking around and saying, there is nothing for me to read.
mhm,
I'm going to write something. I can do better than this,
mhm,
right? X, whatever, from TradPub or from video games, TV, movies, right?
mhm,
Hmm.
And they are of their own volition, not at the behest of their wives, stepping up and saying, I'm going to make something fun.
mhm,
And because they are Christian men, they're going, I'm going to I'm going to cultivate the virtues that I believe in, right?
mhm.
But without being message fiction,
Yep.
right? Like because
Exactly.
their purpose when they set out was not to teach men
Mhm,
or anyone, but to provide entertainment that they felt was missing from their
mhm,
own lives.
mhm.
Hmm.
I think that is a very big difference
Yeah.
between how we see the world and
Mhm.
how this gentleman does.
I think one more thing too that I wanted to bring up is that this guy, and I mean, he's allowed to have whatever focus he wants,
Right.
but he was very much focusing on, like, he has this project, to use that term, which is we're gonna fix men via Christian men's fiction.
Mhm.
And he's talking about taking back the ground from like men's adventure fiction from Clive Cussler and those guys, right? Just something simple that I would say too is it doesn't have to be just like men's adventure fiction,
Mhm.
right? I think we live in an age now where like sci-fi and fantasy are pretty mainstream.
Mhm.
A lot of the best TV and movies are sci-fi and fantasy,
Yeah.
superhero movies. There's a sort of a more broad cultural awareness and acceptance of that stuff.
Yeah.
And those are genres that I think both men and women can appreciate. So I would say, you don't have, even if you were to sort of undertake this project that this guy's taking, you don't have to lock yourself into that genre. Like
Mhm.
the way I'm going to reach men is to make a men's adventure fiction book. I mean, I'm a man, I like a really wide array of stuff, and probably one of the kinds of things that I read the least of would be, Clive Clive Cussler
Yeah.
type stuff. That's probably one of the last books that I would pick up. Not because I would think, oh, I wouldn't like that. It's just I kind of like sci-fi and fantasy and horror and stuff that has a speculative
Yeah.
element to it. So,
Mhm.
so it doesn't have to. You don't even if you're trying to reach men, you don't have to put yourself in a box.
Mm-hmm. Yep. All right. I have been starring comments from the beginning here, so I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
I talk about them. Oh, Andrew Stover brought up earlier an interesting point. He wonders if the tactile sense of an actual physical book would help him to feel like he is like invested in finishing it more. He says he has a lot of half-read digital books. I think that's a really interesting point. I'm not sure.
I agree
think everybody's
100%.
different, but sorry,
Mhm.
go ahead.
Oh, so I agree. I think he's right. I can't read digital.
Sure.
Like it's very difficult for me. I think I've maybe have read one book digitally all the way through.
Mm.
One or I have to have a physical book.
Sure. Yeah.
Mhm.
I started reading Kindle books almost exclusively, and then this year started buying books, stuff that I had reviewed, and just was like I did an unboxing on camera on stream and was just like overwhelmed by like how I felt about it. Like I was not expecting that. Like these were books that I've already read that I knew I liked, right? But like to feel them, the like how thick they were and how the colors on the cover look in real life as opposed to on a screen. Like it really, really impacted me. And I don't know. People always say that men are more physical, so I don't know if that.
I think it really depends. It really depends on the individual and your
Yeah.
habits.
Makes sense.
I've tried both, and I don't really find one always more appealing than the other.
Mm.
Definitely worth experimenting with. Like if you want to read, and that's something that you want to do, but you feel like you have trouble doing it, then experiment with,
Right, yeah.
with things. But
All right, Snow's first comment, hi, thank you for coming, was I find that men read when the reading material isn't a flaming pile of boring garbage.
yep, many such cases.
Yeah, I won't argue against that.
Crate Spain brings up audiobooks.
Mhm.
Definitely something that makes it easier
Yes.
to get through stuff. Because you can do it while you're doing other things.
Yes.
For sure.
Actually, this last weekend, I was painting some models, and I was listening to The Shadow over Innsmouth. Inspiration put me in the mood. Perfect. It's a perfect way for dual hobbying.
Nice.
Yeah, yes. Oh, Shadow over Innsmouth, I think. So I didn't read a whole lot of Lovecraft because I was very much not a horror person in high school and college. I just didn't need that stress in my life. But we took a vacation before we had kids to
Lovecraft Country.
Yeah, Lovecraft Country. So we went to Providence and we stayed there for a few days, and then we drove around in the countryside.
Yep.
And we listened to audiobook versions of Lovecraft stories, and that was the first time that I actually like read like the whole thing of Shadow over Innsmouth. And it was like I just have this very like vivid linked memory.
Yeah, that I love that one. That's
Mhm.
probably my favorite of his, and it just gets under your skin so perfectly and shocks you to the core. Absolutely love it. I love the motif. I love sea monsters. That's like one of my favorite tropes ever. So that it's just one of those stories that it feels like it was tailor made for you.
Yeah.
And so that is definitely me with the fishy, miserable, decrepit in his mouth.
Yeah.
Mm.
I suppose you would like the fish people.
Yes.
And then the happy ending where the main character knows that he's gonna go back to the sea.
Yes. Wonders and splendor beyond comprehension.
It just gives you shivers because he's changed so much in the narrative, like his narrative voice. It's a fantastic story, very well written. William Jeffrey Rankin suggests taking your man to a used bookstore instead of nagging him. But
Yeah.
what if he picks up the wrong kind of book?
Well, is the bookstore day? Is that the new ice cream date? We need a new relationship Twitter discourse about this.
I like ice cream. I like sweets, so I'm always up for that. But I also like books. I can spend a lot more at a bookstore than an ice cream store. Generally. All right, Snow had a wonderful comment that everybody proliferated in the chat very, very beautifully. Instead of making it healthy, we must make healthy. Instead of making it healthy, we must make healthy that is delicious. Do you want healthy cake or delicious cake?
Yeah, there you go. That's it.
Brian McCoppin says men need adventure, which implies violence, danger, and usually a degree of romance. There are a number of outright Christian genre and Christian author indies. Just need to get the word out. And then R.H. Snow says the Iron Age is really going to shine in this area.
Yep, certainly. And especially as more people start hitting their strides now.
Yeah. Yeah, and I have reviewed a lot of stuff on Periapsis Press that's by Christian authors, you know, just writing good books, right? Two that I'll bring up since they're sort of men oriented would be Bloodbane by TJ Marquis. And look, it's thin. This one is about a dad, and he's separated from his family, and he has to go through alien / alternate dimension invaders in order to get back to them. And it's not like teaching anything, but like the ideals of faith, bravery, etc., etc. You should read the book. They're all there, right? Because they're coming from somebody who believes them, but who's trying to tell a good story. It's an awesome story. Other one, I did not set them up like this on purpose. They just were. Would be Collateral Damage by Adam S. Furman. Another story about a dad. But like, I've reviewed so many stories that have like these virtues, ideals, morals, if you want to say it that way, and have male main characters, right? But it doesn't have to be something that we're harping on. They can just be good stories, first and foremost.
Exactly. Well, I think the best way to do it is when the virtues are just imbued into the narrative,
Hmm.
Yeah.
right? I mean, rather than some paint by the numbers, right? Where it's just a given, where I'm the hero, I'm getting back to my family. Like
Yep.
that's the plot, right? Not
Right.
some sort of self-aware, conscientious monologue or exploration of
No.
how having a family is fulfilling a duty that right, or anything like that, right?
Right. Yep.
Hmm.
What last thing I'll ask about this? What do you guys look for, or what would you look for if you were going to be reaching for specifically a Christian fiction book?
Hmm.
Hmm.
Um. Well, it would probably either have to be like an author I'd already read, somebody who is a friend on Twitter, or have something really compelling about the setting or the plot that would make me pick up something that the person who wrote it had categorized as Christian fiction. So I think what we've talked about before is that Christian fiction itself usually has certain tropes,
Mm-hmm.
like either very overt Christian themes, or a conversion scene
Mm-hmm.
is kind of a trope, or just really in your face, when you act wrong, things go wrong, and then when you turn your life around, things go right.
Mm-hmm.
Now, obviously, some people might not categorize things correctly or categorize things a different way, but
Sure.
I don't know. I think there would have to be really compelling reasons outside of the fact that it was Christian fiction for me to pick something up. But I think those things kind of go for other books too. So
Right,
maybe look for something really unique about a book. So
Yeah, I would say that I wouldn't look for anything too beyond what I would look for in any fiction. Is it imaginative and engaging,
Yeah.
right?
mhm.
So I mean, so I would look is does it incorporate Christianity well into a story that is both otherworldly and imaginative. And luckily, I know a few. They're called the Chronicles of Narnia, and they do
Yeah.
pretty well, right?
All right.
Well, I think we should probably wrap it up. We've
I
been
think
going
so.
for quite a long
Yeah.
time. Is there anything that you want to promote while you're on here in front of our gigantic
It's
audience,
huge.
Free Narnian?
No, I can't say that I have anything to promote other than I think probably most everyone here is already a mutual of mine,
Mm-hmm.
right? Or almost we go in the same circles here.
Yeah, definitely give him a follow on
Yeah, if
Twitter
you
if you're
haven't.
not already. Maybe some other time, I think it'd be fun to have him back on and just talk about how to grow a Twitter account and how to use Twitter, because I think he's really good at it. Um,
It's a good
so
follow for
yeah,
sure.
good follow. So that would be an interesting conversation sometime.
Yeah.
That would be great. I'd love to come back anytime you want me.
Yeah. And this has been good, just commenting on the story of the day too. So we'll have to do more of this
Yeah.
in the future. But yeah, is there anything else that we wanted to promote today? I
No,
don't have
I
anything.
don't think so.
All
All
right.
right.
Well, thanks everyone for coming.
Thank you. Have a great night.
Good night, everybody.